Um, okay, so people, we've got a variety of experiences here. Hey, some of you already have a CCP, some of you were involved in writing it, some of you weren't, some of you are onto other plans, some of you are at the beginning stages of your CCP, or that beautiful question earlier of like, what do I do with all this information? I've done the meetings, I've done the questionnaires, now I have all this data. How do I turn that into a CCP document? So I have, I've been doing CCP for like 11 or 12 years now. And I started out with my own nation and have been working with nations across Canada on CCPs. And so what I'm going to share with you is the simplest process that I've come up with on how to turn all of that data into a CCP that meets a couple of criteria. So for me, when I'm thinking about how to write a CCP, there's a few things I want to keep in mind. So one, I want to make sure that my community plan, all my goals and objectives and vision is based on the words of my community members. I don't want to go in there and write things that don't come from the people. That's not my job. My job is to be a funnel for the community voices. And so the process I'm going to share with you, make sure that every statement that your community members share is getting included into the final CCP in a way that makes sense. So that's number one, making sure it reflects the voices of our members. For me, number two, the second consideration is that I don't want to create a structure for a CCP that's different from what my community members' priorities are. So I don't want to try and create chapters and maybe leave out chapters that end up then my outline ends up not reflecting what community members want. So I want to let the voices of my community not only guide the specific goals and objectives, but the whole structure of the CCP. And then a third thing for me is I want to be able to look at the past plans, look at my meeting notes, look at my questionnaire results, and bring all of it together into my CCP document. I don't want to leave any of that stuff out. And so I need a way that lets me bring all of those different sources of data or information together. And then the last thing is I need to be able to do this in a way that's organized. So I'm not getting mixed up and taking in meeting notes twice by accident, or just getting mixed up with all my data coming together. I need a process that's organized and step by step and lets me bring all of that information together. So the process I'm going to describe for you is a way to do that that's just, it's not super complicated. It's kind of step by step. You might have a different way of doing it, and at the end of my presentation, I'm going to invite other stories of the way that you write your CCP, but this is my favorite way. So can you see this slide okay? I did share it in the Slack channel as well. Looks like most of you have turned your video off, so that's okay. And I'm just going to open the chat, so I've got that going. Okay, so you're writing a CCP and you have all this information, and the process I'm going to describe for you is basically taking advantage of folder structure. So whether you use Google Drive or just folders on your computer or SharePoint or Dropbox, it doesn't matter. But basically we're talking about setting up folders to help you organize your information at the very beginning. So step one is to set up a new folder. You set up a master folder for your draft CCP document, and then in there you have subfolders for each type of information. So you can see here in the example, maybe you have one folder with all of the reports and old plans that you want to bring into your CCP. Maybe you have another folder for all the meeting minutes from all of your community meetings that you had. Maybe you have a third folder for all of your questionnaire results that you got. Maybe you have a fourth folder for all of the phone interviews that you did and all the notes from those. Whatever types of information you gathered and the data you got from that, you make a separate folder for each type of information or data that you collected from your nation. And then this is going to be a step-by-step thing. So don't worry. If you have questions, you can put them in the Zoom chat and I'll answer them as we go through. Or you can just pop in and turn your mic on. And I'm going to keep going through and describing. So here you are after step one. You've got your master folder for your CCP draft and then your subfolders for each of your different types of information that you've organized. Then what you're going to do is go into these folders and create a blank document that's just a summary of that type of information. So in this example, imagine I've clicked on my folder that includes all my reports and past plans. And on the left-hand side here, this represents like every individual file. So maybe report A is an old housing plan. Maybe report B is an old council strategic plan. Maybe there's a third one in there that's an old education plan. Maybe a fourth one is an economic development plan, right? And what I want to do is bring all of these together into something that will flow into my CCP. So in your folder with all your reports, you create a new blank document and you call it report summary. And then all you do is you go through every source document one at a time, one document at a time, and you read through it. And anytime you find a recommendation, a suggestion, an idea, or anything that feels planny, like a suggestion for what to do in the future, you just copy and paste it and put it in your summary. And keep doing that. So you just go through all of report A, and every time you see a suggestion, a recommendation, an objective, an action, you're just copy and pasting it into that new summary with a space in between each new idea that gets added. And you do that until you get to the end of your first report A, and you've captured all the ideas in your summary. Then at the bottom of your summary, you make sure that you note which document you've already considered so you don't repeat it, you don't do it twice. Then you just open up your second thing, your report B in this case, and you do the exact same process. You go through that report B. Anytime you read a suggestion, a recommendation, an action objective, you copy and paste it into your summary. So you're taking all the ideas out of report B and mixing them in with the ideas from report A and just copy and pasting at this point. You're not doing any analysis. You're not organizing it in any particular way. You're just funneling recommendations and actions from your source documents into your summary. You might have 10 or 20 old reports or old plans that you summarize in this manner. And what you will start to see is recommendations coming from different reports that are kind of similar. And if you see that, you might put them next to each other without a space in between. And I call those clumps, super fancy name. And so if you have similar ideas, you put them together into clumps. And then if they're different, you have a space in between them. So you can see here in our example, let's talk about this for a little bit. Report A, let's say there was 3 recommendations. So one is that there needs to be a drumming group in the community. The second recommendation is that there needs to be trauma therapy in the community. And the third recommendation is that we need clear hiring processes in our nation. So you can see these are in orange, and then I've copy and pasted them into my summary. Then I've gone to report B, and it also has 3 recommendations. Maybe it has a recommendation for men's circles. So I think while men's circles is maybe kind of similar to trauma therapy, so you can see in my summary, I put them next to each other. I'm not putting a title on it or anything. I'm just putting them next to each other to show that they're kind of connected at this point, right? Report B also says we need more cultural ceremonies. I think, well, that's kind of similar to a drumming group maybe, so I'm going to put those ones together. And then the third recommendation from report B is substance usage. So maybe that's similar to trauma therapy too. I'm going to stick that together with that clump. There's nothing from report B that talks about hiring processes, so that stays on its own. And at this point, when I'm looking at my summary, what is coming through as the priority? If you were to look at this, I'm going to ask you now, what looks like it's the priority at this point based on these first 2 reports?
Trauma.
Yeah, trauma, like the sharing, the healing kind of stuff, right? We can see that we've got these 3 ideas in this clump kind of related to trauma, to therapy, to healing, to sharing circles. So that's already giving me a clue about what the community priorities are. And you can imagine that as you summarize from like 10 different reports, some of these clumps will be giant. And then there'll be other ideas that only have 1 mention, maybe out of all 10 reports, right? And so already, without you having to do any guessing or any labeling of your own, you're already seeing what the priorities are, what the patterns are in the past planning work that's been done. let's go to the next slide. So after you've got your summary done from your folder of reports and old plans, maybe you open up your folder with all your meeting notes, right, from all your CCP meetings. You just do the exact same thing. You create a new document that is the summary of all your meeting notes, and you go through them one at a time. And same thing, anytime someone has mentioned an idea, a suggestion, a recommendation, you just copy and paste it word for word and put it in your summary. And same thing, ideas that are similar, you put them together into clumps, and if they're different, you keep a space between them. So we can see here that our meeting notes, meeting notes A, there were 3 recommendations. One is nutrition workshops, one is clan feasts, and one is walking club. These are ideas that the community mentioned. So they're in green here. Then meeting notes B, there were another 3 recommendations. One was to hire internally. The second one was to make sure that there's clear job descriptions. Those are maybe kind of similar. They're related to jobs and hiring, so we put them together. And then the third one around traditional medicine workshops, maybe we put that together with clan feasts. You might think that nutrition workshops could go together with traditional medicine workshops. That's cool too. So as the planner for your community, you also have a sense of what seems connected and what doesn't seem connected for your nation. So that's like the most organizing you're doing at this point, is trying to figure out what's linked, what goes into a clump together, and what's separate. And you would do the same thing with your questionnaires. You'd create a summary of your questionnaire results, and you go through and just copy and paste every suggestion. And so what you're going to end up with is a summary document in each of your folders. So you're going to have a report summary, a meeting note summary, a questionnaire summary. So instead of 100 source documents, maybe you have 4 or 5, right? So right away, it's giving you, getting you that one step closer to writing your CCP and just organizing all your information. Okay, I'm going to carry on here, and then we just got a couple more slides, and then I'll pause for questions. So now you create a new Word document that is your draft CCP. And for this one, what you do is you open up your summary documents and you paste in everything from, let's say, your report summary. And then you open up your meeting notes summary, and you do the same thing that you did to create those ones, is you copy and paste your clumps from your meeting note summary and stick it in between the clumps from your report summary. The clumps that are similar, you stick them together. If they get really giant, you can break them apart. And basically you're weaving together the summary from your reports, your meeting notes, your questionnaires into this master summary. And at this point, you might want to start to create sections. So you might see, well, it looks like I've got 20 clumps that all relate to lands. So I'm going to create a land section and make sure all those clumps are going in there. I'm going to create a section around jobs and hiring, and all those clumps are going to go in there. And you start to create these sections, but it's based on what you're seeing from your source documents. You're not inventing them from nowhere. You're basing them on what you're already seeing. And so what's going to happen then is you're going to get to a place where you have things organized enough to see objectives, to see patterns among all of the things you copy and pasted, and begin to write those objectives. So you're going to see, look here, you're going to see that we have these suggestions of a substance abuse workshop, nutrition workshop, walking club, trauma therapy, and men's circle. And so I might look at those and go, okay, it seems that I could maybe write an objective that says we need to provide workshops, services, and education that promote health and wellness. So that's my words, but it's based on all of these things that I've taken in from these other documents. And maybe I see these ones around the clan feast, the drum group, the cultural ceremonies, the traditional medicine workshops. And I think, okay, what the objective is here is to regularly have cultural events in the community. So I'm going to put that in my own language at the top of that clump, and I maybe make it bold so it's really clear that it's an objective. And then maybe I write an objective based on hire internally, clear hiring process, and clear job descriptions that says develop policies that promote equity within band affairs or within hiring or something like that. So it's only after you've copy and pasted all these individual ideas from your community members and from past plans, then you write the objectives and then you do the organizing. But like I say, then you know that it's coming from the voices of your people. And it's going to point you towards the areas that need more attention than others. So let's say your nation only has like two statements about like technology, but they have 30 that relate to culture and healing. Well, obviously the culture and healing section of your CCP needs more attention then. Maybe you don't have a separate section on technology, it just gets wrapped in with governance or infrastructure or something. So this for me then lets me create the chapters and the sections of my CCP according to what is important to my nation, rather than what ISKS the chapters need to be or what other communities have done. It's like a really grassroots approach. And so here's just an image that shows how they all flow into each other. Again, you have your all your source documents here on the left, and then the summary of each type in the middle, and then it all gets wrapped up into your draft CCP at the end, where you'll have these objectives and these sections that come from the words directly of your own members. And then that is the draft that you would take back to the community and say, did I word this right? Is anything missing? Did I use the wrong word here? Does this make sense? Do these sections make sense to you? And the last thing maybe I'll mention about this is it's a really nice way to make sure that you can include quotes. So because you're copying and pasting people's words verbatim, if someone has a really juicy quote, you can make sure to include that in the final CCP document. And it's just so valuable in making sure that people see their own voices reflected in this document, that it's not written by some, you know, white planners in Vancouver or whatever, even though they're great too. But when people see their own words, their own quotes reflected in this document, they go, hey, I said that in a meeting, and this is my plan, this is my voice, this is what's important to me. And that's the only way that this plan will be used well in your community, is if people see themselves reflected in it. It's also a nice way to honor all the staff that worked on those old reports. When they see the recommendations from the old reports and plans in the new one, they go, hey, all that work I did wasn't wasted. It's been included in this new CCP. So they feel validated and appreciated. Like I say, there might be many different ways to write a CCP, but this is my favorite process for making sure that I don't miss any ideas that come from the nation, and that I'm building the whole thing based on what my people are asking for. So I'm going to pause it there maybe, and we've got like 15 minutes left. If you have comments or questions or want to share your own ideas for how to write a CCP. And this PowerPoint is in the Slack channel too, if you want to review it later. So let's pause there. And Nicole, welcome, welcome. Mariah, we had a couple folks join a little late. So I've just gone through the PowerPoint that's in the Slack channel. And if you have any questions, we could follow up later too, if you missed part of it. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions or want to share a story of how you wrote your community CCP that might be different?
Hi, good morning. It's Emily here. I am the community-led pilot coordinator for the Wheatlalayu, and we are going to be tackling the CCP book very soon, and it's pretty intimidating, but I'm excited to see your PowerPoint through Slack once all of our technical difficulties get sorted out. But this is a lot of information that I really appreciate, so thank you. Any pointers for us for the bare bones? I guess that I have to see your PowerPoint to know that.
Yeah, I can screen share again. Well, here's maybe like the very first thing I think is to make sure that you have good records for all the engagement you did, and just keep it organized. That's the main thing, especially when you're starting a new CCP. Imagine like how many members are in your nation? A few hundred, thousand?
Oh no, Wheatlalayu is like a really yeah, you know as you're nodding, yeah. So we have about 200 people, but the turnover of history, right? We're trying to really, even through the CCP, understand membership, and whether, because we can't go right up to ISK and get a status card, because none of us want to lose our identity to be under the umbrella of Wheatlalayu, but to start creating our own Bronx cards, you know, and having like fun community engagement through this, and giving us our own membership numbers so that we can at least track record, because we don't really have an on reserve, off reserve, but yet you have 40 years of people saying, I've only ever known Wheatlalayu as home. you know what I mean? But they've left home and come back. So how do we still share those stories through the CCP?
Yeah, so you might want to do lots of, like with a small community, you have the opportunity to do lots of one-on-one interviews where you just phone people directly and say like, what's your vision for the community? You've been here for a long time. What do you think needs to change? And so I think the principle remains that you just want to keep really good track of all your notes, all your information. If you're going through old records, making sure you've got it all organized so that when you get to the stage of writing, you're not finding pages of handwritten notes with no date or no title and going like, even from, right? Which totally happens. So I think from the beginning, the key thing is keeping your notes organized and honoring the input that people are giving you by making sure everything has a date, has a title, has the names of the people that participated. And then when you get to the point of wanting to pull all that information together, you'll be in good shape. You'll have it all just ready to go. I think another thing maybe is digitizing stuff as you go along. Lots of people like to handwrite things still, especially our elders, but for the eventual writing process, digitizing as you go along and making sure you have everything stored in a couple places, maybe like online, on your computer, and hard copies can be a really good thing too to make sure you don't lose anything. I've heard of that happening too, where people just lose a year's worth of meeting notes. So just keeping good track of your records from the beginning is a good first step. And know that there are a lot of support. So when you get to the point of wanting to write your CCP, then you can reach out and get some help at that point too, when it all when you have more specific questions.
Thank you.
And sorry, Jessie, I was wondering that like some areas are an abundance of information, and then the other areas which are like the groundwork, infrastructure, under the ground, the piping, the water service replacements, like all those are like mundane, limited information coming out, right? So it's trying to really inspire engagement on those bigger things. And I really love Crystal's way of where would you spend your money? And that gave us an idea of getting some monopoly money and trying to help community be like, I would put my money here, right? Because I think our people focus, no, they don't focus. It's just easier to relate to when you know there's a dollar to it, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I think too, that can be really a good place to get staff involvement. So if you know there are things that the nation needs to do that community members just aren't aware of, because it's kind of like internal projects, making sure you engage staff and get their voices into the CCP can fill in some of those gaps. And then maybe another note is that your CCP doesn't need to say everything you want to do, but it shouldn't prevent you from doing the things you want to do in the future. So we can't predict the future, but we don't want to write a CCP that says we're going to focus on single family housing and then get a few years down the road and realize that actually you need multifamily housing, right? Better to just keep it general and say we need housing for everyone. And then the specifics of how that happens gets sorted out down the road when you've got the funding, right? So the same thing might go for infrastructure. You might not say, well, we need a new like sewage treatment plant at this site, but you could say we need sewer and water treatment that meets the needs of our community. And you leave it high level. And then a year down the road, when you do a capital plan, that's where they figure out the details, but they're going off of that high level goal from the CCP. Adina, you had your hand up. I bet you've got some great ideas to share.
Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if you guys were here when we did the introductions, but my name is Adina Young. I come from Old Masset. I'm an elected council member for Old Masset Village Council. We are on the implementation stage of the CCP, so we've written our CCP and some of the activities that we've done right at the very beginning, and this was about 3 years ago, so it's taken this long for us to get to phase 3 of CCP. So right at the very beginning, we always had consistency, and this is all prior COVID, so everybody was comfortable coming to the community hall, and our facilitators had up a bunch of activities. They had things all over on the wall, and we used stickers, we used sticky notes, we used markers, and it was really hands-on engagement, and they made it really super friendly for all ages to participate. We included our elders, our young children, and all the ages in between. And we really wanted to pull all of the ideas, like really just tell our community, give us your wish list. It doesn't matter how big it is, how out of reach it might seem, but let's just give, like being able to give the power back to our community members. And our population on reserve is about, it's about 600. We never had the all of community come, but we've always had anywhere between, anywhere from a dozen people to 80 people coming out to the very beginning. And there were some really core people who wanted to come and see it through. But the consistency was something that was really helpful for us in Old Masset. Same time, same place, all the time. People were coming. And our facilitators had really good notes, like what Jessie was talking about, keeping them organized, pulling things, summarizing everything. And then we got our facilitators were the ones that drafted our CCP, and it was a big document. There were a lot of things that were feasible and non-feasible. So we went through that and we started taking things out that weren't achievable or tangible or something that, and then we broke it down some more to short-term, midterm and long-term goals. And then we condensed that down to, I think maybe it's about a 30-page CCP booklet with each category of what Old Masset Village Council departments are. And now we're on the implementation stage of it, and we're looking for, how do we take this CCP and share it with our department managers, and how can we develop plans? Like, what does the planning process look like for the village council to be implementing the CCP that the people gave? But I think the most important part of the whole CCP planning is really listening to the people and giving them their voices and sort of flipping the switch, because the colonial ways that we've been brought into, everything's always come from the top down. And with the CCP, we're flipping the switch and we're listening to our people, and it's coming up this way. Just like Jessie said, listening to sharing quotes and personalizing it to the community and really empowering them to share their ideas. And I'll just share this, as a council member, I really had to learn how to not impose all of the education that I know and what I know is going on internally as a council member, and our internal discussions and things that we need to do to make things happen. So really sort of just sitting there and not saying anything is what I had to learn to do, and not to impose and say, oh, we can't do that because, or, oh, I don't know how that'll work because, but it's just like, oh, wow, I never thought of it that way. Oh, that's never come up in our discussions before. I could see how that'll work. And just really encouraging them to use their voices at the very beginning, and maintaining that the continuity of, set a date, set a time, set a place, and be really continual with it. And as long as you're consistent with the schedules, people will show up. Sometimes it'll only be 2, sometimes it'll be a really big crowd depending on the topics, but definitely encourage them to use their voices, and definitely be consistent with scheduling on when people can be heard. Creating that space and that opportunity for people is really important, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dina. So such beautiful lessons in there. And I love that one about not imposing your own views. I think lots of times when a CCP coordinator gets hired, there can be a misunderstanding, and people think it's their job to tell everyone what needs to happen in the community when it's the other way around, right? You don't need to know anything about what needs to happen in the community to be a coordinator. You just need to be that funnel where you get people together to share their voices, and you funnel that into the final plan. And it works a lot better actually if you don't impose your knowledge and your expertise on other people, and you just really validate them, just like you're saying, and say, thank you for sharing that. I can hear that that's really important to you, or this is a big issue to you, and I'm really glad you're here to share your views for the CCP. So thank you for that. One other thing that I just thought about too, and I'll note that we're going to 11:20. We're going to break at 11:20 for 15 minutes and just shorten closing plenary a bit. So we still got a few moments. You might find when you're writing your CCP that people have made all these really specific suggestions that are really good, but they're kind of too specific to belong in your CCP if you don't want your CCP to be like 300 pages. So I like to do 2 things in that case. One thing is you can create a summary of all the really specific suggestions for individual areas and then give them to the staff members from those departments. So like, let's say people have a lot of suggestions around economic development and they're too detailed, too specific for the CCP, and you summarize them into higher level goals and objectives, but you don't want to lose the wisdom of those specific suggestions. Put them all together in a summary and give it to your economic development officer and just say, hey, I thought you might like this. This is all the community engagement we did on economy. And you're not going to see all this in the CCP document, but it's some great ideas that came from the community. So lots of times staff members can really appreciate you doing the legwork for them of getting these ideas and handing them off. The other thing that I see a lot of communities doing is, in addition to creating your CCP, which you want to be a little bit shorter, like Adina mentioned, a 30-page CCP booklet or something. You know, we've seen 1 pages like from Souk up to however many pages. But in addition to your CCP, you can create an implementation strategy where you take the high-level vision goals from your CCP and then put just a little more detail into it about how you're going to implement those things. So they're 2 separate documents, so you keep the detail out of the CCP and put it in your implementation strategy instead. And that implementation strategy then is kind of like your work plan over the next little while, and it gives you a home to put those more specific suggestions and the prioritization and the budget and all that stuff. So you can think about creating those 2 separate documents if you're getting a lot of really specific ideas. We've got about 5 minutes left. Does anybody else want to share a question? Note that we've got the Slack channel open for writing your CCP if you have follow-up questions or resources to share. But at this time, does anyone have any other questions or examples to share? Yeah, Stephanie, go ahead.
Hello. One of the other things that I was thinking of doing, because we've written our CCP, but it was after now with COVID, is trying to get the community engagement of like their ideas in videos so that we can make a video later on with like a picture of, say, like a community health center with their voices actually saying what they want so that they can hear it and see it all at the same time. So while you're collecting the information, it might, just an idea.
What a beautiful idea. Yeah, I think when we say writing a CCP, I'm automatically think about words, but you're right. There's so many other ways to get people's voices, and video is a great one, even just audio recording. So thank you for that reminder, Stephanie. Those voices will be so precious down the line, hey? And then Adina's just posted in chat that the booklet is personalized with photos of the community engagement. It's easy read. So it's a great story there about a best practice around writing CCP. I think maybe a last note I'll make is just take a look at examples. That's a great thing to do if you're in the middle of writing your own CCP. Look at as many as you can, just to get an idea of the diversity, the similarities. What do you like about other communities' CCPs? How can you bring your own community's flavor into the CCP you're writing? And again, just make sure that when your community's members pick it up, they see themselves reflected in it. And it's easy enough to read and it can be put into action. So I think what Kyle just said, we've got a minute left. We're going to be sucked out of this breakout room. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your voices and your check-in and your suggestions and your questions. And I just, I'll keep an eye on the Slack channel, and I hope you all have a great time writing your CCP. And feel free to reach out for support if you hit a wall at any point.